Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have with me Dr. Subramanian Swamy, 6 times Member of Parliament, former Law, Justice and Commerce Minister, and someone who knows his politics very well. And he had recently visited Sri Lanka after the Rajapakshas had returned back. And he's here to tell us a little bit about what is happening in Sri Lanka and also whether Sri Lanka is now in a state where India can say that, okay, we understand where Sri Lanka stands, and if India and Sri Lanka can now tango, go lockstep, because there's a lot more storms headed India's way. This is my take. Let's first welcome Dr. Swamy. But before that, you can send your questions to Dr. Swamy, hashtag Ask Doctor, and please keep it on topic. Thank you very much. Dr. Swamy, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Okay, good. Namaskar. So, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'm glad because we generally tend to talk about the United States, China, Russia, rarely about our neighbors, and especially neighbors who are nice to us or at least passive as far as we are concerned. We hardly take notice of it. And only bureaucrats go there and strut around and come. Uh, I would say that in Sri Lanka, they take India very seriously, and there's a lot of coverage in their newspapers, in their seminars, and so on. But surprisingly, in India, there's very little in-depth thinking about Sri Lanka, and so I must say that PGurus is doing a great service by having this kind of a discussion. And I'd like to broadly speak about the what our relations, how they developed over the last 70 years, because Sri Lanka also became independent in 1948. And so, the 1 year after we had become, and originally they were actually part of India, but the British, of course, saw it that it was severed and became an independent country. No harm. I mean, it hardly matters. We are neighbors, so that's what is important. So I would say that the DNA of Indians and Sri Lanka is the same, and they look like us. They dress more or less like us. I mean, at least the women who in India have kept up the tradition the same way the women there in Sri Lanka also have kept up. They wear saris and like the women in India, and so and then there may be Christians there may be Muslims there, but broadly speaking, the Buddhists are the 75-80% of Buddhists, just like here Hindus are 80%. But as you know that we have regarded the word Hindu to encompass, for example, in the Constitution of India, Hindu is said to include also Sikhs, Buddhists, and Jains. So in that sense, Buddha is a 10th avatar in our pantheon. So, I mean, there's no religious hostility. But what happened is that during the British period, they decided to bring in two kinds of people. Because the Sinhalese were mostly farmers, rural people, and so on. So, in order to have a modern city administration and so on, the British brought in the Tamils, and they also brought in Tamil workers to work in the plantation. So, the Tamil workers in the plantation were all in the south and west of Sri Lanka, and historically, over the centuries, people were coming from mostly from Kerala in those days, through the waters, the Indian Ocean, going around the peninsula of India and going to Sri Lanka. So the northern part, to which their boats docked, where they saw there's hardly any inhabitation, they made their settlements there, and so the people who settled there, they speak with a Malayali accent, and many of the Malayali words are there in it. But because the English during the English period, the Tamil was given a lot of importance, and the Tamils had already during British rule in India had learnt English, and so could, do the files and so on. So they were given a lot of importance, and so when the Sri Lanka became independent, there was a huge gap between college admissions, in college admissions, in bureaucracy, and so on, of Tamils in proportion to the overwhelming population ratio of Sinhalese. By the way, the Sinhalese also came from India originally. They were Buddhists who came from Bihar and Orissa, and so when you go on talking about some of our foreign ministers are complete idiots. You see, they talk about the poor Tamils. We have got Tamils in our country. There is an attachment. I mean, we are all going to go on talking about Tamils for some reason. In what way are they Sinhalese, not Indians? I mean, Sinhalese are also from India, and therefore you should, not bring this Indian issue when it comes to Tamils. If there's some human rights issue or something, you can raise it. But the fact is that there is no difference between as far as the Indianness is concerned or Indian ancestry is concerned, between the Sinhalese and Tamils. So we have a situation where when the British left and it continued, the Tamils were highly educated. They were dominant share of the colleges and schools and so on, and they were part of the bureaucracy. And so after independence, this question of bringing Sinhalese also in some proportion, that led to a lot of tension. And then they found that when it comes to examination from colleges and the competitive exams, they found that the Tamils had this advantage, and they were scoring much more, and so they were even through the competitive system also. The Tamils were coming in much higher proportion than their population. So the first problem arose when I think it was 1972 or thereabouts, when the Sri Lankan government, and it was a democracy, so the voting was done by population strength, and therefore the Sinhalese formed the government each time. And so the Sinhalese government then decided that there will be a marks, for the competitive exam, the Tamils will have to have a higher percentage of marks, the marks achieved, than the Sinhalese. So that's how the tension originally started. There were a lot of discussion. There's Tamil leaders met the Sinhalese leaders. They came to agreements. These agreements were broken. So it went on and on. And finally, a group of people thought that all this talk is useless. We must pick up the gun, and we must, in fact, form a separate country from the northern part. The southern Tamils did not join in that. That's a very interesting thing, that the Tamils of South, who are the later Tamils, who are really still had relatives in India and so on, they did not join that movement. But the northern, the Jaffna and the Chinkamali and so on, these places, the Tamils, a group emerged, in which ultimately one terrorist group led to another terrorist group, in each dog eat dog sort of thing. And finally, the LTT became the dominant one, which is a highly violent thing, organization which got all this money by drug running. So they were the biggest and most reliable runners of narcotics, and so they collected their money that way. And so a situation came where the LTT began using military methods. They, in fact, were able to get a part of the northern part completely to themselves. They wanted to create a immigrant government, if you may want to call it that. And at that time, the Sri Lankan president Jayawardena and Rajiv Gandhi decided to come together, and there was a pact signed which enabled India to democratically integrate the Tamils of North with the Sinhalese in the southern parts, and hold elections, and then have a détente between the Tamils of North Sri Lanka and the Sinhalese. But unfortunately, Rajiv Gandhi couldn't take it forward because he himself lost the election. But he had definitely cleaned up. The Indian army, which went in the name of IPKF, cleaned up the whole thing. And they held elections, and they won the elections, and a north and east of Sri Lanka part was created as a provincial council with autonomy. It is at that time the Sri Lankan leadership under Premadasa decided to support the LTT to fight the Indian IPKF and force them to leave Sri Lanka. It was a very foolish thing to have done, and and uh, and Premadasa himself paid a very heavy price, because as soon as the IPK pulled out after seeing all these casualties and feeling a sense of what is there? There's no gratitude here. We are come here to save them, and they say they are helping this very same organization to kill us. So there was a withdrawal, and at that time, the LTT thought that why this Premadasa, we don't need him anymore. So they assassinated him. So the man who supported them, made them, gave them weapons, gave them money to fight the Indians, was ultimately assassinated. And then, of course, the killings went on and on and on, until Rajapaksa came to power. In the meantime, the LTT also killed Rajiv Gandhi, and they were very keen to kill me also. And they put me on the hit list. And Vaiko came and told me about it, and I laughed and told him, that's very interesting, because I also have a hit list, and Prabhakaran is number one on that. So let's see who gets whom. And ultimately, you know, the person who came to power is the person who became my very good friend, and he and his brother, who was then defense secretary, they they finished off the LTT and killed Prabhakaran and wiped out the organization. So I'm giving you this because this is the background of. When the question really came of elections, naturally that party which gave them liberty won, and as a consequence, they ruled for many years. But India, the UPA, a very very strange thing. I found that surprisingly, Sonia Gandhi was supporting issues of the LTT. She may not have, supported LTT openly, but despite the fact her husband was assassinated by them, she educated the daughter born in jail of the Nalini, who was one of the principal carriers for the LTT, and she's an Indian citizen. and she was a principal carrier, and she was. The Supreme Court said if there's anybody who deserves capital punishment, then it is she um, uh, who should be given, Nalini should be given capital punishment. But Sonia Gandhi wrote a letter to the president, then president, to say that she should be given mercy and it should be converted to life imprisonment. And she's there right now under life imprisonment. There are still efforts going on to release her also. But the fact is that it took us by surprise. And bigger surprise was that one day Priyanka Gandhi turned up in jail, sat with her, spent 2 hours with Nalini to talk with her. Nobody could understand. First of all, it was illegal because once you are convicted and you are you are due to be hanged. Of course, later on, the governor of Tamil Nadu converted that hanging to life imprisonment. You're even then you kind of except relatives, nobody else can go and meet such a person in jail. But for Priyanka, no rules applied, and she went and she discussed with her. What did she discuss? We don't know. Why did she go? We don't know. And throughout there, I have been noticing that the LTT, there's a strange attempt. The people, our media, of course, was saying, "Oh, this is all Christian values. You must understand, and you shouldn't doubt it." But I can understand if your husband has been killed by them. How can Christianity tell you to be humane to the killer of your husband? At least you keep quiet about it. Can't go and propagate them. Then Nalini produced a child inside the jail, and excuse me, Sonia Gandhi enabled her to study in England and paid the fees. These are all known facts, you see. So I am saying that in Sri Lanka, there was this constant suspicion. What are these people up to? So when UPA was there was a lot of hostility. But Rajapaksa, he's a man, very stout-hearted person. I'm talking about Mahinda Rajapaksa. And he didn't mind, but he went on. But he found this whole country is dependent on exporting tea and getting imports for food, everything based on the money they are earning from just export tea. So he decided, let me see if I can industrialize. So that brought in the desire for him that near his hometown, Hambantota port should be created, because Sri Lanka is in a very critical position. It's right in the, shall I say, the mouth of the Indian Ocean. And so he thought that this will be a great place, will bring in a lot of revenue. So he decided to set up this new, the harbor and a naval base like situation. Investments were put in, and infrastructure was built. But for the money, they asked India. That time, Manmohan Singh was the prime minister. And Sonia Gandhi publicly announced that no, nothing doing, not a penny for that. And so that's how the Chinese came in. The Chinese didn't have to be invited. They themselves said, why you bother? We'll give you the whole thing. So about $12 billion have been expended by China on this and associated investments. And the Chinese hold began to get serious, because now Chinese are very clever people. They first give you very quickly, and then when the installments come and you want a little delay and so on, that time they'll put in new conditions. And this way, situation developed to the point where the Rajapaksas had to yield because India was not ready. So now we are in a situation today where um, if India has to play a role, it has to replace China. Otherwise, you can't play a role. And the way to replace it is to see how we can help them stand on their own feet. Now, I personally feel that 12, $13 billion, which in a bilateral way, the this loan was given by China. India should tell the Sri Lankans, according to me, I'm not saying that anybody in India has ever expressed any such thing, but I think if you want the Chinese to go away, then I think we should tell the Sri Lankans who are under heavy pressure now to make the repayments, which they can't, and they may have to buckle down. So not so that they buckle down. Therefore, I would say that India should say to Sri Lanka, we'll give you a loan of $12 billion for say 20 years, and we suggest you use this to free yourself from the Chinese hold. Once you pay that, this bilateral, then China has no leverage whatsoever on Sri Lanka. So this is one aspect. Second is Sri Lanka is rice producing, tea producing, and they want industries to be built. And we should help them build the industries. Those industries which we can easily build, and not Adani is not the right man to go. I mean, they are forcing. I mean, I know that Adanis have already defaulted on 2 projects earlier, and now the Indian government, the Prime Minister himself, is calling up uh, the people in authority. So this brings me to the question: what has happened in the last few months? How is this connected to all this that I am saying? But without recognizing what all that has happened, you will never be able to understand Sri Lanka. So that's why I gave you this background. It might be a little boring, but it had to be put across. What happened was that Sri Lanka was earning all its foreign exchange by export of tea and export of rice, etc., etc. They had nothing, no real industrial items to export. So when the corona came, corona naturally, everything came to a stop. So their entire foreign exchange requirements has suddenly evaporated. And there was also additional matters which are not serious, but it has been played up a lot. There was an experiment to see whether fertilizer, without using fertilizer, you can grow, rice and wheat and so on. And that, of course, was failed. But it's not as people say that this is was forced on people and so on. In fact, Gotabaya, when he was president, he actually gave fertilizer free when he found that this corona has put all the farmers in such difficulty. But there was no way to send it abroad, export it, because everything had fallen after in the first 8 months of the corona. So the entire foreign exchange earning dropped to a very big low, and then the loans which were there, they couldn't pay. And in that situation, the people began to get restless, because the fuel which was all 100% imported from abroad for Sri Lanka, they couldn't import because they didn't have the foreign exchange. And we weren't giving them anything anyway. We said you're too close to the Chinese, so on. Our bureaucrats were making our bureaucrats have never liked Rajapaksa, I think. I don't know why, maybe because he was a man of his own mind. But that demonstration took place, but now their investigations show that it was not a spontaneous demonstration. and I'm not going to supply proofs or what I was told, but I would wait for the final report of the investigation to tell you how this whole demonstration took place. Why is it suddenly disappeared? Because the army, which remained neutral, there hasn't been a single casualty of firing at that time, at the peak of the movement, where the army intervened to bring in law and order. But subsequently, after they were able to get the resignation of Gotabaya and Mahinda Rajapaksa, the the matters started. The army began taking interest, and then this whole thing just evaporated. They've just disappeared. There's nothing. If you go to Sri Lanka today, it's looks like it was all before, except that you see army presence much more than you used to see in in the earlier days. So as of now, there's peace. As of now, they have still a major economic problem. As of now, they are under heavy pressure from the Chinese, particularly because in the last 1 year, India has been very generous relative to the past. I wouldn't say it's generous enough, but relative to the past, India has been very generous and they have got what they want. Of course, they have had all these nasty, like our foreign minister went there and started inspecting petrol pumps to check whether petrol was really on short supply or not. I mean, those things are just throwing the weight around. That has happened now. Of course, doesn't now we got a very good ambassador also, a high commissioner rather, and he's a very well read person. He's got a background and he has understood the problem, and I had a talk with them. So now it is a new climate that has come, and we must take advantage of it. And you can only take advantage of it if you release the Sri Lankans from the debt that they are owing to the Chinese, which they got easily, but now the Chinese are using rough methods to see that they comply. So I think we are in a situation today that this is an island which is right in the mouth of the Indian Ocean, and they are our people. Their language has many words in common with us. They dress like us, they think like us, act like us. In many ways, it's a country that needs to be supported. It's a highly educated country. They are capable of becoming a electronic center. They can become there's maybe a relative to India a much smaller country, but still the fact is their population must be close to 16, 17 million people, and they are all very bright people. Many of them are abroad. They're doing extremely well. So India must seize this opportunity and for its own national security, because then the Chinese go away, it improves our situation. Otherwise, Burma has already gone to the Chinese, and we are in Bhutan is almost flip flopping on China. So at this time, and then of course the Chinese have taken our land, and our government is still pretending that no land has been taken, but they've taken a lot of land. And then one of these days, they will have a war with us if we don't retaliate. And for that, we don't have friends because our relationship in the Quad is very wishy-washy. And then we are also with the Russians. We are also with the Chinese. How can you be all? You are abstaining in the United Nations. There's, it's absurd to abstain. But we are doing that because we are afraid either of Russians. Russians, of course, are junior partners of China. So essentially, you are afraid of China. So this has to be overcome, and a new uh, think tank should be set up in the Prime Minister's office or wherever to devise how we can liberate Sri Lanka from the clutches of China and be easily aware, our support should be easily available instead of all the rigmarole that goes on from the bureaucracy. This is how I would put it. I've taken half your time, but I thought I need to put this in a perspective. And now you can tell me what you think.
Dr. Swamy, many geopolitical experts feel that China can only be stopped by two countries. First of all, many now say the next big war is going to be on the seas, on the oceans, and only two Asian countries can stop China. One is Japan, and the other one is India. So, India has what it takes to stop China. It can also basically choke them at Malacca Strait. And if needed, India is also going to be able to stop China on the CPEC side also. Basically, that is how India should be planning. That's what many geopolitical experts say. I don't know how far India's think tank is moving. There has been some talk in the recently concluded UN sessions about whether Pakistan, it's now they are not saying if, they're saying when Pakistan breaks up, will India demand a part of Sindh? And there is a reason for saying that, and I'll come to that a little bit later, Dr. Swamy, but just your preliminary thoughts on whether this is how you see it.
First of all, look at the geography. Andaman and Nicobar Islands are in two parts. The bottom part is called Nicobar.
Car Nicobar? Yeah.
Car Nicobar is part of that. It's called Nicobar. And the bottom point, which used to be
Indira
called Car
Point.
Nicobar, is now called Indira Point, yes. So that is 70 kilometers across the Malacca Strait. The Malacca Strait is flowing there, and across the Malacca Strait is Sumatra of Indonesia. So if we have good relations with Indonesia, we don't have bad relations, but we don't have good relations either. I mean, they have Lord Ganesha in their 20,000 rupee currency note, and they are culturally very close to India. They have Krishna on a chariot giving upadesh to Arjuna, and that's right in the middle of the town, in the most fancy area. In the middle of the road, it is planted, a big chariot with Krishna standing there. So you can, this is a country which is very easy to befriend, but I don't know why we have not. And but we are generally always looking at Europe and all, and America and so on. So if you can have a military alliance with Indonesia, and Indonesia doesn't like China at all, let me tell you. Their military is totally against them. And there was once upon a time in 1965 when there was almost a Chinese coup, which of course they defeated. But if India and Indonesia get together and say, you on that side, yeah, we on this side, we shall control the traffic on Malacca, just like Suez Canal, and we will charge also a fee. We'll have to put in gates and so on, things like that. Then you can prevent the Chinese commercial traffic. 80% of Chinese commercial traffic to the west comes through Malacca Strait. And China are far away. They're nowhere near. They can't send their navy. If they do, that navy is in trouble. So that is why Sri Lanka has become so important for China. And so to remove Sri Lanka, join Sri Lanka as Indonesia, India, the three of us together, if we manage the Malacca Strait and the 70 kilometers difference between the two shores, then you have essentially any traffic of Pacific Ocean going to the west has to, like Suez Canal, pay you some money. Otherwise, you won't let them go. So this is something that needs to be worked on. Have we ever worked on it? No, we have never worked on it. Why not? I don't know. But I think our politicians don't have strategic thinking. They don't have no time for these things. And it requires a certain degree of effort to bring these countries together. And I would say we should start with Sri Lanka and then invite the Indonesians, and three of us have a conference. And then the second thing is that Soviet Union is gone. So what we have is Russia. Russia is not Soviet Union. If you want Soviet Union, then even Ukraine is Soviet Union. In those days, it was part of Soviet Union. So today it's a separate country. So Russia is a separate country. It has nothing to do with Soviet Union. And he, since they has nothing to do, they are totally dependent on the Chinese for money, because all their other sanctions and all has had a huge effect on them. So now they are totally dependent and they are a junior partner. This is held now widely in the world, and even our own Indian diplomats like Mr. Gokhale and others who are foreign secretary, they have written books to say that Russia is a junior partner of China. And as a junior partner, it can never go against China. Recently, they have announced, it came on the front page of our newspapers, that Russian ambassador in Delhi said we have no more anything to do with India's dispute with China. This is a bilateral problem. We don't figure into the picture. So that is because the Chinese told them, you lay off now. It's something that it is our business. And the Russians coolly moved out. And they used to claim that they are mediating. And our newspapers used to go in raptures. Oh, Russia, our true friend, is coming. Did nothing of the kind. In fact, they misled us. In April 18th, 2020, a young officer of the IS with the Defense Department, she noticed that the Chinese had arrived in a part in Ladakh, and she sent a word to Delhi saying that the Chinese have come. And Indian government, like a good schoolboy, asked the Russians, what is the Chinese up to? And they said, give us 2 days. After 2 days, they come back. No, that is only military drill. They will go away. They never went back. That whole area now of Depsang is with the Chinese. And so, of course, the Russians can't say anything except what the Chinese want them to say. So we can't have anything with Chinese. We can't have it because they are sitting on our territory. They must get out. And then we can consider a friendship with China again, but not now. But Russia, that's absolutely useless thing. So who have you got? You have only the democracies of the world: Japan, Korea, um, uh, Indonesia, India, Nepal. All democratic countries have to be brought together, because China has made deals with every country which is not a democracy, whether it's Turkey or it's Brazil or any other. So um, you have to have good relations with the United States. You cannot have good relations with the United States if you're also having good relations with Russia and also meeting the Chinese in this conference and that conference. The Americans, they are, whether they're right or wrong, they have a black and white picture of everything. And if you want, what can the Americans do for you? We don't want their troops. We got plenty of troops. What we want is their weapons, and they will give it to you if you say that we will take the Chinese on. The only country in the world which can take the Chinese on today is India. There's no other country. And so it requires a major policy overhauling, which some mysterious reason Mr. Modi is not in favor.
Well, unfortunate, Dr. Swamy, because there are simple solutions to difficult problems, but there's always a but that comes in the way. And looks like there's a but here also. Let's move on to take questions from our viewers. Kamalaksh Shanai wants to know, can we please have a detailed discussion on the state of Indian economy? What is the
You
debt at present? Why is government,
Well, this got nothing
why
to do with this subject.
we have
You
had many
hold,
such discussions.
you hold
Yes.
next week or something another session on the
Yeah.
Indian economy, and I will deal with this in great detail.
Yes, sir.
After all, my 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 hometown or my ballpark, my own ballpark, I'll be happy to do it.
Varun wants to know, can India build a military base in Sri Lanka, say at Trigonamalai or preferably at the tip of Jaffna?
Well, why not? I mean, but you have to win the confidence of the Sri Lankans, and you can't do it by sending bureaucrats. And certainly not Jaishankar and Doval, who have a very bad name in Sri Lanka. They may be very good officers or not. I don't know anything about it. Of course, Jaishankar is now graduated to minister, but he's as bad as he was when he was an officer. So I think Trincomalee anyway. The Chinese have the Sri Lankans have anyway given us a lot of control of. But we have not built a military base there. It's a superb military base to build. But we must also do it in the Indian Ocean, which means Hambantota. Hambantota we should take over. We should, whatever debt these Sri Lankans are owe to China, we should pay that, not directly to China, but give it to Sri Lankans and say, get out of this bondage of the Chinese, and then have a regular military relationship with Sri Lanka, saying that we'll stand by you, and not just give speeches. Don't let Chinese ship come there. I mean, the Chinese ship was contracted to come there because the Chinese misled the Sri Lankans as to exactly what the ship was about by changing this the painting of the ship and so on. It is actually a ship, but one ship can't do anything. But still, the fact is that military ships of the Chinese should not be allowed. And I'm sure that in the future, if you handle this issue, if you had handled this issue better, I'm sure the ship wouldn't have come. But instead of saying no, 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 you can't let them come. So for 3-4 days, they put it off after having committed that they can come and pass through to the Indian Ocean. But we need finesse, and finesse in dealing with Lanka, and that means government should do wide consultations with intellectuals, with the military people, with the established record of being foreign service officers, and come and have a Sri Lankan policy prepared on which you should work.
Next question from Mr. Lee. Did the Sinhalese-Tamil conflict begin in Kandy when the Hill Tamils in the estates adopted Marxist ideology and the Brits decided to use Sinhala nationalism to curb such tendencies?
See, this Kandy and all, they are not part of North. They are west, southwest. Okay, and the Hill Tamils are not at all have anything to do with Marxism. Maybe they had something to do with Groucho Marx, but not Karl Marx. You see? So I know them. I knew Tondaman. I know his son. I know his grandson. His grandson is now is a minister. Was a minister in Rajapaksa's time. Now he's a member of parliament. They are all people who are total nationalists. They have been neglected all through. We have only been talking about the Jaffna Tamils, Jaffna Tamils, Jaffna Tamils. But the real poor people are those who are or on the plantations of southwest Sri Lanka. Now, so Kandy and all, it's got nothing to do with Marxism and all that, but it's got to do with poverty, and we have to do something to remove that poverty. And as far as North is concerned, Rajpaksa has already finished the LTT. We couldn't finish them. They, in fact, managed to kill Rajiv Gandhi also. But Rajpaksa and Gotabaya, let's not forget, Gotabaya was the operations chief there. And there was another person who is now the secretary of the defense secretary. He was that time Major General. He's written a wonderful book, which you must get hold of, dealing with the whole operation, how LTT was finished. So they decided one day that all this talking and all the UN and all the bakwas that was going on must end. We have, because the LTT one day came to Colombo, and from a tower, from a tall building, they were able to see the swimming pool of the foreign minister, who was a Tamil, Kadirigama, I think his name was. And they shot him dead, you see. So soon enough, Rajpaksa felt that Rajpaksa came later, but he said, there's not going to be no peace in Sri Lanka unless they are eliminated. And he eliminated them. He wiped them out. So
Sir, I think
therefore,
the person you're mentioning, I think, is Lakshman Kadirgamar.
Yeah, Lakshman Kadar. Very nice man, Tamil, very articulate, foreign minister. They killed him while he was swimming in his own swimming pool, and therefore now people can go anywhere in Sri Lanka without any difficulty. Otherwise, previously the people were afraid to come out of their houses. So I don't want to go into all that. I will only say, don't say Tamil, Tamil, Tamil like this. Our foreign minister now goes on saying, we have to concern about Tamil. What concern? If you're concerned about Tamils because they happen to be from India, what about the Sinhalese? They are also from India. They're from Bihar and from Orissa. Why don't you talk about them? I mean, as if you're also a South Indian and therefore you're a different Indian from North Indian.
Sir, the external minister, affairs minister, I have to say this, seems to remember the Tamil thing, but he doesn't seem to remember that he's also a Tam Bram, sir.
Not welcome in Tamil Nadu. Yeah, well, but he's a JNU Tamil, bro.
Next question. Next question. Did Lanka Congress have any links with Indian National Congress? Some claim that Lanka never had an independence movement against British, and that's why Lanka did not merge with India in 1947.
Not correct. The Congress, Jayawardena, who later became the president, was the leader of the Congress party in Sri Lanka. And he asked to be included as part of India. But Jawaharlal Nehru turned it down, because the British went to Jawaharlal Nehru through Edwina Mountbatten and got him to issue a statement that no, Sri Lanka is not part of India. Now we see the whole history of India. We have so many links. Ravana was not a Sri Lankan. He came from Noida. I mean, his village. You can even go and see his village, where they put a board that this is Ravan's hometown. But he went and conquered Sri Lanka and took it over. It was a very prosperous country. I think one of his distant relatives was in fact the king of Sri Lanka. He defeated him and took over the country. So during the freedom movement, Sri Lankan party, Congress wing, was also part of the freedom struggle. And Vivekananda went there, and you can see what he has spoken. You see, he's spoken the entire history. So there is nonsense. Yes, once we said no, the British naturally made up for it uh, by helping them to get jobs as peons and chaplasis and paper carriers and so on. So I would not say that they were not. They had a link. They were part. They were a branch of the Indian National Congress of the Mahatma Gandhi. But thanks to Jawaharlal Nehru, we disowned them.
Sir, how many countries happened like this, sir? Nepal, Kalat, Sri
Yes.
Lanka, and also the area that what's his name? Frontier Gandhi was Pakhtunistan,
Pakistan,
Northwest
Pakistan.
Frontier
Yeah,
Agency. Yeah.
Afghanistan, even Sindh and that western part which is border
Balochistan, yeah.
Balochistan. They all wanted to be with India, but Jawaharlal Nehru said, "No, thank you."
Okay, so this is the last question, Dr. Swamy, and with this we'll bring this program to a close. Ramkumar Rudra Bhatla wants to know, as India supports Bhutan in producing hydro energy, can't India promote Sri Lanka's potential for wind and solar farm development?
Certainly, but India supports Bhutan, and I'm telling you, Bhutan is moving away, sliding away to China because of our behavior with Bhutan. We in a crisis we come and show a lot of concern. Afterwards, everybody's forgotten. And anything that they want from us, a long bureaucratic hassle on it. So today, don't bank on Bhutan. We'll have to get them back. We'll have to win them back. Maybe I should visit there. It's a beautiful place, and I know the
Break the ice.
yeah, I know the king well, and I know their establishment well, and the ambassador in Delhi. So at the moment, we are slowly losing Bhutan. Nepal, is not very friendly with us. We just don't know how to deal with non-European countries, and with the European and Americans, we crawl before them, we prostrate before them, or whether it's the Russians or the Chinese, we are clearly compromised in some way, and that's why we are not able to take a stand.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swamy. That was a wonderful trip down memory lane as we looked at the history of Sri Lanka and how things have come to this now. And it's going to take a big heart. And I think India needs to help Sri Lanka. Maybe there are some other things that India can insist upon to make sure that this Sri Lanka has autonomous. It can be a country, but it needs to be able to support itself, be able to sustain itself. I don't know. There are some things.
Let me interrupt you. Interrupt you. Rajpaksha, Mahinda Rajpaksha, has twice or thrice said, China is our friend, but India is our family, openly, publicly. And you have just to Google it and you will get it. When did he say this? Now, what more can he say? And instead of that, you're giving lectures, we are for the people. When the whole demonstrations were going on, Mr. Jaishankar says, we are for the people. What do you mean you are for the people? You're not the king of Sri Lanka. You are for the people. Democracy was being murdered. All the people in Sri Lanka who had to ultimately resign, all of them were elected by a fair election. There was an election. They won the election. It was accepted that they won the election. Now suddenly a mob comes and says, "Resign, resign." How can you tolerate that? India should have said this is not allowed. If you want, you can have a new election, but you cannot. You cannot make anybody resign when he has been elected. You see, here is India is a relative, and China is a friend. Another place he said India's family relative is even stronger. So I think we must understand that we shouldn't have kept quiet. We should have condemned it. saying this is mob. We cannot agree with this. Why do you think that the Sri Lankans invited me to this conference? I think the Chinese delegates in that conference were quite unhappy that I was a keynote speaker and the original speaker. And I mean, I was the inaugural address. And why? Because at that crucial time, they were all being made to look at criminals when I said, no, they are elected people. Mobs cannot decide who will resign and who will not resign. It cannot be done. And it's a violation of the UN Charter also. I can give you the articles of the UN Charter. So I think, let me say, sorry to take away your time and interrupt you, but I'm telling you that the worst thing that has happened, and they now, I am told, I will have to wait for the report. I can't vouch for it, but I was told by knowledgeable sources that there was involvement of anti-Indian forces in that mob.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swamy. And viewers, we are going to be back in a few minutes with Abhijit's show. And that's a different link. So you'll have to log out of this one and log in back on that one. Dr. Swamy, thank you so much, sir. And as always, a pleasure having you on our channel. And we'll talk about economy, your forte, and a few questions that I have. And I think there's also one discussion. You're one of the first ones to talk about breaking up Pakistan into 4 parts. There is a nuance that is coming up, and we'll talk about that also as a separate session, sir. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Namaskar.